Before I hand him the microphone, let me also say that today's conference is being live streamed on all NCRI websites, the English website, the French website, and the Arabic website. Without further ado, I now ask my colleague Behzad to join us for the presentation. Behzad.
Merci Ali. Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour et merci pour votre présence à cette conférence de presse. C'est une conférence de presse qui se déroule dans une actualité brûlante concernant l'Iran, bien sûr, une actualité qui touche aussi les médias français. Mais regardons d'abord dans quel climat se déroule cette conférence de presse aujourd'hui, indépendamment de, disons, les aspects qui concernent aussi la France. Hier soir, vous ne l'êtes pas sans savoir que pour la troisième nuit consécutive, différentes villes du pays, de notre pays, l'Iran, ont été témoins de soulèvements populaires massifs pour protester contre le coût élevé et le pillage du gouvernement. Rien que le prix du pain a été multiplié par 10 en l'espace de 2 semaines. Ce sont des détails que vous avez certainement suivis dans la presse. Alors, jeudi soir, le soulèvement s'est étendu à des régions de Téhéran, la capitale, et aux provinces
Different
du centre
cities
et
of
de
Iran
sud-ouest, les grandes provinces
have had
de l'Iran,
many
comme le Khouzestan,
protests
comme
to
Isfahan.
complain
Des
about
centaines de
high
personnes et de
prices.
jeunes ont été arrêtés.
The price of bread was multiplied by 10. On Thursday night, the uprising Yesterday morning, teachers protested. This has been going on for years, but there are more and more protests. Those mobilizations or the repression tried to stop the demonstrators. However, protests took place in 20 provinces. A large number of teachers were arrested to prevent these recent protests. So you can see that with the information that I'm providing, we have information on the arrests.
Vous en avez quelques représentations ici sur ces images.
You can see some representations here on the images, but just to give you some references, let me quote just with a few sentences, because here with me, the latest resolution from the UN General Assembly, to show you that what we are witnessing and that is developing a greater interest at international level. This is the resolution from December 2021, adopted a few of arrest demonstrators, the use of torture to obtain confessions in cases of suspicious deaths in prison. These are some quotes from this 8 pages resolution to show you the concern of the international community.
Après, donc, ce que je viens de vous citer, M. Massoud Rajavi, le président du Conseil national de la résistance iranienne, le CNRI, la coalition
NCRI, Democratic Coalition Against the Religious Dictator in Iran, has asked the NCRI to compile documents on the judiciary system in the country, especially around what is happening or what happened in the prisons of the regime, so that they can be shown to the public, the UN and other human rights defense organizations, to inform the world of what is happening inside Iran. This is the point of this conference. What is the organizational chart, the hierarchy that is in charge of those massive and serious human rights violations in the prisons that I myself experienced, the Devine and Rezerechar prisons, where I spent 3 years myself as a former political prisoner. Today, we will be sharing 4 parts of that research with you that the People's Mujahedin Network inside Iran has brought to our attention. The first part, and I will ask to show on screen the first part, is the name of more than 33,000 regime prisoners, including chiefs, interrogators, intelligence agents, and executioners. The names of these agents and guardsmen and mercenaries are listed in these zones, and you can see parts of them on the screen. Of course, this is in Farsi. We received them recently. We didn't have time to translate them, but I just wanted to show you the configuration. So as you can see, we have the numbers. It's broken down per province, and in the second column, for some, you can see the position of that person who's part of the prison organization. It might be a administration representative, the director of a prison, and then some specifications on the role of that person on the third column. You can see it on screen. So this is a list of more than 33,000 people. And as we are showing the list, I might mention a specific case, because right now you can only see names, but these names are people. So what are they in charge of? Because in the society, everybody has a function. While you can see the list of names on screen, I'll give you an example. In the latest report from the UN, a report was presented in March 2022 during the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. I will mention a specific case so that you can see what is happening with Mr. Navid Aftari. Navid Afkari, you can see his face. He's wearing a sportswear. This man was a champion of sports in Iran. He was popular and was executed because he took part in the uprising in November 2019. This is a well-known case at international level. The UN and Amnesty International were mobilized on this case, but let's look in detail at what happened. I will explain Navid Afkari's case while you can see the list of names. So look at what the rapporteur said in this case. First, there were 2 brothers. He is saying that so this is from the UN rapporteur. The authorities continue to isolate for extended periods. The rapporteur is concerned about Ravid and Walid Afkari, his 2 brothers who are currently in prison. The prison authorities have isolated them since September 2020 to avoid them communicating information about the situation of their brother who was executed in September 2020. This is the role of these people, of some of the people whose names are on screen. So this is one individual case that I'm mentioning out of 33,000 names. The special rapporteur was concerned by the number of deaths while in detention in obscure circumstances which were not investigated. The death that took place in the Grand Téhéran prison, a large prison at the south of the country, are a symptomatic example. Sharin Nasseri, a person who died in prison, was found dead in September 2020 in prison, 1 year after the death of Navid Akhtari. The judiciary threatened to prosecute him had he witnessed of this. In September 2021, 1 year after his death, Mr. Nasseri was put in isolation, and in October, the judiciary said that the cause of death was medical poisoning. I will pass the details, but just for you to see that Navid Akhtari, who was a well-known political prisoner, how his two brothers and somebody who wanted to testify about him being tortured in prison was executed in prison. This is one case out of many. I won't provide details. It's a lengthy report that you can find on the website of the UN Human Rights Council. So just imagine that for each of those names, regardless the name, of course, these are Iranian names, not Pierre or Jean, but what matters here is that in front of each of those names that you can see on screen, there is behind each name a case that is similar to the one that I just used as an example for Navid Afkari. There are many more, of course, and the special rapporteur mentioned several of these. The report is about from prisoners. We are scrolling through the names. We are at 19,000 names, and this lengthy list, which is also included in those files. So if you want to check them at the end of the conference, you can come and read it through. You can check those files where all the names are listed, more than 33,000 names, people who are in charge at different levels of this repression inside the prisons. So, second part of this conference will now focus on photographs. Photographs of 22,765 people, and out of these 33,000 plus people, on the right screen, you will see pictures of 22,765 photographs or people, and some of the photographs that you can see, right here you can see signatures. Sometimes there are squares without photos, and on purpose we decided to hide, because rather the prison organization decided to hide those photos in order to replace them by the photograph of the owner of the photograph instead of the photograph itself. Once again, you will be able to see those photographs more closely. They are in this book, and you can check them after the end of the conference. Third part, which does not appear on screen, but I will briefly mention it to you. This third part is about the location of the management of the organization of the Iran prisons. Here is the organizational chart. The staff of this prison in the Evin prison in the northeast of Tehran. We can send those information to you. This is the central facility of the prison organization. And next to this, we have a long list, 1,169 people. You can also view it at the end of the conference. That includes the names and positions of these people, internal telephone number and direct telephone number. This is included in the list. This is a detailed list, and this time it focuses on the high management staff of the prison. That's it for the third part. And for the next part of the conference, we have the next speaker who will explain the fourth part of this conference, which focuses on the photographs that you can see on the left. Ali will provide further details. Over to you, Ali.
The fourth section of what we'd like to share with you has to deal with the catastrophic and horrific situation of prisons in Iran. As you know, there are hundreds of prisons across the country. Most of them have been built some 50 years ago, and they are totally unsuitable for holding so many number of prisoners. In addition to that, of course, the Iranian regime is pursuing a policy of overcrowding the prisoners, where the number of actual prisoners is several times the number of the capacity of each prison. What we have across 100 pictures of various prison cells out of 31 provinces in Iran, and I will try to share some of them with you to give you a visual sense of how the predicament of prisoners in Iran is. If I may ask for the first slide, please. This one, as you see, is in the province of Isfahan. You can see how prisoners have to sleep in corridors, and they are all cramped in major halls, which is by far much greater than the capacity of that cell. Next slide, please. This is in the province of Ardabil. As you see, again, the number of prisoners far exceeds the space that is available to them. Next slide. This is the province of Alborz in central Iran. You see people are sleeping in a corridor while some are waiting to have their issues resolved. Clearly, there's no way that these prisoners could get any sound sleep. Next slide, please. This is in Ilam province, which is in western Iran. Again, the situation is the same. Next one, please. This is in East Azerbaijan province, in the northeast. As you see, people are cramped in small rooms, and the beds are three-level beds. And again, one wonders what their situation is like when it comes for them time to sleep. Next slide, please. This is in western Azerbaijan. Again, you see people are sleeping next to one another with very, very little room to move around. Next slide. This is in West Azerbaijan. Again, you see some people have been forced to sleep in staircases and in corridors because there's simply no room for them to sleep in the cells. Next one, please. This is in Tehran province. Again, the situation remains the same. You can see how overcrowded the bunk beds are, with several people on one bed. Next one, please. This is, again, Tehran. Look at the corridor there, how crowded it is. And next one, please. This is in Charmahal Bakhtiyari province in western Iran. These are subhuman conditions that the regime basically applies to prisoners who are being detained on various charges, most of them bogus, of course. Next one, please. This is in Khorasan Razavi in northeast Iran. As you can see, people sleeping next to one another on the floor of the cells because there's not enough room for the beds. Next one, please. This is province, also in the northeast of Iran. Again, situation is exactly same as before. Next one, please. This is in Khuzestan province, in southwest of the country. And look at the conditions of the prison. Look at the walls, how dilapidated they are, and how the prisoners are sleeping next to each other like sardines. Next one, please. This is in Zanjan province in western Iran. Again, situation exactly the same as the other one, other prisons. Next one, please. This is in the province of Fars in southern Iran. You can see people really don't have any space to sleep properly. Next one, please. This is in the province of Kurdistan in western Iran. The picture is worth 1,000 words. Next one, please. This is in the province of Kerman in south of Iran. Again, you can see how disastrous the situation of these poor inmates is. Next one, please. This is in Kokiluye and Boyer Ahmad province, again in western Iran. You can see people don't even have space to sleep. Some of them are squatting because there's not enough room. Next one, please. This is in Gilan province, north of Iran. Again, situation same as the other prisons. Next one, please. This is the province of Lorestan in western Iran. Look at how, again, the prisoners are sleeping side by side, just like sardines. Next one, please. This is the central province in central Iran. Again, look at the predicament of these poor and prisoners and what they are subjected to. Next one, please. This is the province of Hamadan in western Iran. This is precisely why the Iranian resistance's president-elect, Mrs. Rajavi, has repeatedly called on the United Nations to go to Iran, visit the prisons, see the situation of the prisoners, and of course, with a particular focus on the plight of political prisoners. Next, please. This is in the province of Yazd, in sort of south-central Iran. You can imagine how many people are in this one big, as they say, a general public cell. They are standing up there because there's not enough room for them to sit down. This basically gives you a glimpse of what is happening. Next set of slides I'd like to share with you have to do with, you saw here the overcrowding of the prison cells. We have come across some documentation, if I may ask for the next slide, which basically, it's in Farsi, of course. Since we just got it, there hasn't been enough time for us to translate. But if you see at the columns, the very right-hand side column gives the name of the province, the quote for the prison, the name of the prison, the date that it was founded. It says the square footage of the prison. Then on the column that you see is with a red bracket and a sign, it's the stated capacity of each prison. For example, the very first one, East Azerbaijan, the stated capacity of that prison is 1,500 prisoners. The column next to it is the number of beds. The column next to it, which is the number of beds that prison has, which is 2,660. But when you look at the number of prisoners, it's 3,788 prisoners actually are being held in that prison, which has a capacity of 1,500. This means that there's at least 3.5 times the capacity of that prison. Look at the next prison, East Azerbaijan. Again, the stated capacity for prisoners is 80. The actual number of prisoners is 402. And we can go down the list. Is basically the same type of ratio that we are watching. Can I have the next slide, please? This is, for example, in Mazandaran province in the north of Iran. The stated capacity for a prison in Tonekabon is 40. The number of beds that they have assigned to that prison is 126. One wonders how they can fit 126 beds in a situation where you only have a capacity of 40 people staying there. And of course, the actual number of prisoners there is 509. If you look at the one below it, the Hormozgan province in the south by the Gulf, the stated number of the capacity is 1,500, the number of beds 1,700, but the actual number of prisoners in that particular prison is 2,595. And the same is for the province of Yazd. We saw the picture. The stated the number of beds is 1,710, but the actual number of prisoners is 2,425. These slides, which are of many more of them, gives you a glimpse of what is actually happening in prisons of Iran and why we believe it is imperative for the international community and particularly the United Nations to get involved, send its representatives, and inspect the situation. I now give the floor to Behzad. Thank you.
Merci Ali Safavi. Ces photos me font remonter des souvenirs des années 80 où nous dormions un peu pareil. Donc je veux vous dire que c'est une situation inhumaine qui dure depuis maintenant 40 ans sous cette dictature religieuse qui est à bout de souffle en ces jours d'insurrection et situation explosive qui prévaut dans notre pays, en Iran. C'est pour ça d'ailleurs que l'organisation des prisons est l'un des organes les plus horribles, les plus criminels du fascisme religieux au pouvoir en Iran, dans la répression, la torture, l'exécution, parce que c'est l'échine dorsale, c'est le système, c'est la colonne vertébrale du système de répression du régime des mollahs. Alors récapitulons juste avant de répondre, si vous avez des questions. Ces derniers mois, des pressions de toutes sortes ont été exercées sur les prisonniers en général, sur les prisonniers politiques en particulier. Je dis bien ces derniers mois, parce que nous sommes dans une situation accélérée sur le plan social, sur le plan politique en Iran. Pour vous citer que quelques exemples, pendant la présidence du pouvoir judiciaire d'Ebrahim Raïssi, l'actuel chef de l'exécutif iranien, au moins 25 prisonniers, dont 3 prisonniers politiques, sont morts en détention. Donc ça, c'est pour la période Raïssi. Des décès sont survenus à la suite de passages à tabac, de torture pendant la détention, ou de privation de soins médicaux, ou d'autres négligences de mauvais traitements manifestes de la part des autorités. Et pendant la période de l'actuel président du judiciaire, donc celui qui a remplacé Raïssi, qui devient chef de l'exécutif, qui s'appelle Mujahedin-e-Khalq, qui est un autre tortionnaire, le meurtre de prisonniers politiques s'est poursuivi. Dans de nombreux cas, les autorités judiciaires ont affirmé que des prisonniers s'étaient suicidés ou avaient tenté de présenter leur mort comme une mort naturelle. Disons que les actuels dirigeants des pouvoirs iraniens sont tous des anciens tortionnaires ou des anciens interrogateurs des prisons, aussi bien le chef de l'exécutif que de législatif ou de judiciaire. Pour d'autres cas, la nourriture, le pain des prisonniers ont été réduits de moins de moitié. De nombreux détenus meurent de faim. Ils ne fournissent pas de médicaments, de soins aux prisonniers. Ils ne soignent pas des prisonniers malades. Dans de nombreuses prisons, il n'y a pas de séparation de catégories et les prisonniers politiques sont détenus aux côtés de criminels dangereux par qui ils sont torturés et harcelés. Donc là, quand je vous cite ça, c'est-à-dire on est en train de dire que font les gens dont les noms circulent.
Wondering what these people are doing, the names that you're seeing. Prison health is declining catastrophically, and all kinds of skin and infectious disease are rampant in prisons. The concentration of prisoners in the wards has increased so much that in some prisons, prisoners have been placed there many times the capacity of wards, which you saw in the pictures. In all prisons, female prisoners have pressure, and poor and homeless women are sexually abused by corrupt prison officials. Forcing prisoners to work, and that's an important aspect we should mention, is another routine method, and tens of thousands of prisoners are employed in jobs whose income goes entirely into the pockets of the mullahs, judicial leaders. The people that you're seeing must work, and these people earn money and share it amongst them, depending on hierarchy. And in return, the prisoners just get a meal and nothing else. I talked about the special rapporteur's report, Javid Harman. I won't mention too many details, but I'd like to tell you that Amnesty International on April the 13th, 2022, last month, also launched a new report saying that Iranian prison authorities are committing a shocking violation to the right to life by deliberately barring sick prisoners from accessing vital medical care and refusing to investigate death resulting from illegal activities and to bring justice and accountability. In this report called Death Waiting Room, so you saw those rooms, Amnesty called these death waiting rooms. Death from deprivation of medical care, documents how prison authorities have been involved in the death of political prisoners or common law prisoners. In this report, you can find details in 2010, 92 men and 4 women in 18 provinces and 30 prisons throughout Iran. These documents have been compiled. I gave you the date and quoted that report from Amnesty International. So now we're creating a link between the images that you saw and the list, which are not very telling, but when you compare them to actions of serious violations of human rights, you can understand and wonder who is the author of those barbaric acts. And that is exactly the point of our conference today. We wanted to draw attention to the hierarchy of responsibilities for these crimes. I will conclude on the reaction that I just received from the president-elect of the National Council of the Iranian Resistance, Mariam Rajavi, who received this information, which was received very recently. We didn't have time to translate them for the French media. I will quote Mariam Rajavi. This is just an outlook of the crimes of the Iranian prison regime, more than 120,000 crimes, like in November during the protests, these 120,000 murders happened over the 40 years of the religious dictature. She sent a call to the UN Security Council to visit the prisons and to meet prisoners. This is very important, to open those doors and meet the prisoners, to hear them. This is our demand. She insisted that the UN Security Council should take care of those cases of the crimes of the fascist regime in Iran, which is a shame for humanity. Khamenei, Raisi, Ejeri, the president of the judiciary, and the previous leaders, because let's not forget that there are judiciary prisons, but there are also intelligence prisons that are not listed in this configuration that we just showed you. Mrs. Rajavi is demanding that all these people that I just mentioned, the leaders of this regime, be brought to justice for what you just saw, the silence and lack of action against those massive violations from the international community, Western countries and Europe. Lack of action against such massive violations contradict the values of the UN and the EU, for which 10,000s of people lost their life. This is a quote from Mrs. Rajavi. I will conclude on this. I want to remind you that I will leave those 1,169 names for you to view. We didn't circulate them, but this is part of the HQ of those prisons and the leadership who manage all of this repression. I will now give the floor.
Here, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask and we'll try to respond as best as we can. We have also received a number of questions from media who are watching this conference live. We will get to them after we respond to questions from journalists here. Is there anyone who has a question? Okay. We have a question from the Kuwaiti newspaper As-Siyaseh, which says that after the appointment of Raisi as the Iranian regime's president, has there been any improvement in the conditions of prisons in Iran? Maybe, Behzad, you want to address that? Or I must say that, in fact, after Raisi became president, the situation has gotten even worse. Indeed, a couple of days ago, a senior Iranian prison official said that we are going to add to the number of leg braces for the prisoners. And in fact, what Raisi has said, he has told the judiciary, particularly the judiciary chief Gholam Hossein Mohseni, AJE, that they should expedite the case of prisoners who are on death row. That is why we see now that the number of executions in Iran since Raisi took over